Hello, hello. Yeah, perfect. It works. Super. So, welcome everybody. My name is Miko Isekutovic, and we are here at the St. Agnes, at the beautiful St. Agnes place, at the gallery of Johann König, that we are partnering with for this gallery weekend to present a series of talks. And today, now we have a very special one, Art as Healing. And yeah, I'm very happy that we are coming together the first time since we started the Wellbeing Culture Forum in the wake of COVID-19. We are the first time coming together in the physical space, but still most of our audience will see this talk in the virtual space of Zoom that we are all went used to through the months of COVID, and we also became a little crazy through the Zoom. I learned that when you look at Zoom faces in Zoom meetings or Zoom talks, your brain permanently has to calculate the person that is in front of you, has to somehow try to make a picture of this person, and this is extremely exhausting for the brain. And I think this is not the only thing that is exhausting for the brain that we will that we will address today during this talk. It's super beautiful for everybody that is now not with us. We have beautiful weather, and a wind is blowing nicely, and we are sharing the stage with a tree that is sometimes touching us. I mean, especially this place here is yeah, no, it's a very nice feeling. I think also Cecil is close to the tree. The tree was already yesterday a very important participant in our discussion, because yesterday we started this series of talks with its mission title, that is From Breaking Bauhaus to Growing Gaia, and it's basically this talk series is addressing how human design intersects with nature, but nature in the wider sense of the nature around us and the nature in us that we are very often alienated from. And I think this will be today also an important topic. Yesterday joined us here, I will now introduce the panelists, Lucia Petroisti in the talk about Gaia, and I'm very happy that we are now here to continue the discussion we started yesterday with the focus on health and how art can help healing. And I don't have to introduce you, you are the superstar creator of the Lithuanian Pavilion that won the Golden Lion, and that made me actually cry because it was so beautiful to listen to to read and listen to the libretto. And you are also the curator of Ecology at the Serpentine Gallery, what is the very first time this function was constructed, and I think it was absolutely necessary to do it, and I'm very happy to have you here. And then I want to introduce Cecil Tollas. Cecil, we are working with Cecil together because Cecil is creating on a molecular level of smell, and this is extremely fascinating. So we met Cecil Tollas very first time, and I will come to this, in Azulik in Tulum, where she exhibited in the Spheric Museum from Claudia, that I will introduce after Cecil. And her work was only smellable. So you had to smell the walls, and then you could smell the work that she created on a molecular level. And this is extremely important because COVID showed us how the molecular level is something that we don't consider or we don't take under consideration when designing what can have deadly consequences. Because we are all connected on a level that we cannot see. We are communicating on a level that we cannot see. We are actually a symbiosis of different organisms. With our own body, we are carrying more than 40% of non-human cells that are actually part of our immune system, part of our interactions, part of our moods. And we don't really consider things that we can see, and this is how we simplify the world, disconnecting from nature. And Cecil actually with her work is reconnecting us. So I'm super thankful that you're here, and you're an amazing artist, and I'm looking forward to our project at the Architectural Biennale. And we met Cecil because of Claudia. Claudia Petzold, that is here with us. She's an independent curator, and she was the machine or the motor, as we say in Germany, behind the art program of the most impressive for me merger between nature and human architecture, that is Azulik and Umai in Tulum, created by Eduardo Neira. It's a building that seems to grow out of the rainforest, and it's a building that became part of the rainforest, built it with ancient Mayan technology. One of the spiritual leaders of this project joined us yesterday from the rainforest in Tulum. It was Abuelo Antonio and his wife, Abuela Antonia. They were giving us blessings, but they are also patrons of this project, where then Claudia was responsible for many amazing exhibitions that I had the honor to witness, and one of them was the one from Cecil. So welcome, Claudia, great to have you here. And the last person I will introduce to you is today my co-moderator, and was also yesterday my co-moderator, Roya Sachs. Roya, thank you so much for doing this. Roya is an independent curator. She yesterday moderated the forum Breaking Bauhaus, and I learned more through her moderation than from my own preparation. So actually I'm super thankful to you, and now I will ask you to introduce the other two panelists, and then also to open this forum. And thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mikolai. So swiftly moving on, right next to me is the beautiful Ria Hamid, who I've just had the pleasure of meeting, who is a Bangladeshi-American artist, model, writer. Her work explores meandering intersections of brown femininity and invisible trauma with dynamics of class and displacement. And through her work, she seeks to understand the symbiotic distance between self and the external. Ria, thank you so much for being here. And then last but not least, Lilith. It's so nice to see you again. Lilith Glimscher is a multidisciplinary artist, director, curator, and organizer, making public art, large-scale physical and sound theater, site-responsive installations, immersive opera, sculptures, paintings, and video. Their work unpacks questions of liberation, violence, gender, power, rape, time, body, and nature. Lilith is also co-creator of You Are Here Creations, which is all about healing through creative expression, which we'll discuss today. And she graduated from Harvard University and has a clinical research psychology degree. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. So a big round of applause for our panelists. Thank you very much for being here.
So since today is really all about healing and catharsis and what it means coming together as a community, we thought what not better way than to actually start with our own group healing performance. So on that note, we're going to start with a performance by Yoko Ono from the early 1960s, which everyone's going to actually partake in. And she published a book in '64 called Grapefruit, which was a series of event scores, which were just instructions that she would give to individuals to read, such as any of us. And you could essentially decide if you wanted to partake in the instruction or just be an observer. Today, we're all going in to partake. So the performance we're going to all do together in a minute, and I'm going to ask you to stand up, is called Voice Piece for Soprano. And you can see it up here on the screen. It just says, scream. 1, against the wind. 2, against the wall. 3, against the sky. So what we're all going to do now in our own cathartic opening experience is stand up, and at the count of 3, I'm going to ask everyone to scream for 20 seconds as loud as they possibly can. Without microphone. Okay, I'm going to time this so that you all know when to stop. But it's very important that we all do this together. Otherwise, you're going to embarrass your friends and yourself. You're merging. Okay. Don't leave me. Okay, I'll come up when it's time to stop. Okay, on 3. 1, 2, 3.
I don't know if I can talk anymore.
Anyone feel lighter?
All
I have
right.
to say it's substantially easier.
Get off. Sorry.
It's a lot easier on the physical self to wash your hands for 20 seconds.
Totally. Singing happy birthday, yeah. So there we go. That was an act of catharsis. So that is really the purification or purgation of emotions, especially pity and fear, primarily through art. So, Aristotle said that catharsis essentially described the effects of true tragedy on the spectator. The purpose of tragedy is to arouse terror and pity, and through that, we get in touch with our emotions. I hope you're all in touch with your emotions now. Now, the big question is why is catharsis, or this release, so important in our quest for finding this healing that we're going to discuss today? And I think today, more so than perhaps in other years, this kind of critical importance of us finding a mental, physical, and emotional peace of mind has really come to the foreground. Of course, because of the kind of global meltdown that we've been experiencing, but also that, society is going through an all-time high of anxiety and sleep disorders and suicide rates and lowered stigmas. So, we are really going to discuss what are different alternative methods individually and also as a community. I spoke for a long time with Nikolai about this talk, and it was really inspired by a book which was quite pivotal, I think, for many people working in the arts, and it's Alain de Botton's Art as Therapy, which really explores the ways in which art can be used as a new method to find therapy and to also heal. So it's really a way to inspire us, but it's also used as a coping mechanism. And he says, art can offer a grand and serious vantage point from which to survey the trails of our condition. Now, there's just one paragraph, and then I promise I'll stop talking, which I think from the book just really describes well what we're going to discuss today. And from there, then we'll open the discussion. The notion that art has a role in rebalancing us emotionally promises to answer the vexed question of why people differ so much in aesthetic tastes. Why are some people drawn to minimalist architecture and others to Baroque? Why are some people excited by the bare concrete walls and others by floral patterns? Our tastes will depend on what spectrum may be either serene and restless, courageous or careful, modest or confident, masculine or feminine, bourgeois or artistic, and our preferences for one kind or another is varied in our psychological gaps. We hunger for artworks that will compensate for our inner fragilities and help return us to a viable mean. We call a work beautiful when the simple virtues are missing, and we dismiss it as ugly when it forces us to face things that we feel threatened or overwhelmed by. Art holds the promise for inner wholeness. So on that point, I think in terms of inner and outer wholeness, I would love to first ask Lucia, appropriately. I know you've just spoken about it so many times, but we have to, of course, start with your absolutely magical Lithuanian pavilion at the Venice Biennial last year, which, of course, also won the Golden Lion. And you'll have to pronounce the artist's name because I have no idea how to say their names. But it was a long durational opera piece with beachgoers, essentially. I'll let you describe it. But the one thing I want to come away is that everything I read about it is the intense emotional reaction that people had coming to see this performance. And a lot of people that rushed in, as Nikolai just said, came out with floods of tears. And I think one great quote I read of yours is, I think the art world is having a nervous breakdown. So I'd love to hear from you. Could you talk about the project and why do you think everyone had such a cathartic experience?
Yes, absolutely. And can I just ask Sheena if you wouldn't mind putting on the screen the images of people in bikinis? Thank you. And maybe I'll take the opportunity to thank you, Sheena, and the whole Terme team and you, Mikolai, again, obviously, for the invitation. Shelby, Monilola, Heiko, oh gosh, Fena, Tragyang, Sheena, Margot, everybody, all you guys there, and everybody else for having me. So much gratitude to you for your very warm and healing hospitality. The project of the Lithuanian Pavilion is a work by 3 artists, Rugile Bardziukaite, Lina Lapelite, and Vaiva Grainite, who shared a childhood, in fact, together, and then split off into various kind of directions. So a writer, a composer and visual artist, and a theater and film director. And together they came together to thinking about a piece that would bring all of those forms at once and would be true collaborations of those forms. And actually, the opera as a medium is one of those formats. So Sun and Sea, which was presented at the Venice Biennale of last year as the Lithuanian Pavilion, under the name Sun and Sea Marina, because we held it in the Marina Militare, the military zone. Sun and Sea kind of presents itself as an opera as you approach it, but you cannot approach it directly, and you certainly don't approach it as a stage with a stage in front of you, but rather you enter an environment or a building, and the audience was invited to walk up some steps, and onto a mezzanine. And from that mezzanine, and I think, yes, there you go. And from that mezzanine, you would be looking down at an outdoor scene reproduced indoors with, real sand and artificial lighting that made this very sort of over bright pastel-like sunshine, like a kind of Baltic midday of July, I would imagine. And then there's people on the beach, and they are doing what you would normally do on the beach. In fact, the stage directions are to do whatever you would do on the beach. There are children on the beach. My own child was on the beach. I have been on the beach to rest, actually, during the Venice Biennale opening. It's very stressful time. So actually, you go and hide on stage. Dogs, ball games, yoga sessions, tarot card readings, all kinds of things happen there in a kind of spirit of just kind of daily life and the experience of the daily. Now, some of the characters on the beach are singers, soloists, and what emerges from this stage area is a series of songs. And the songs are the inner life and conversations of these characters lying very lazily sprawled on a summer day, on a summer holiday. And they begin by making you think that they are thinking about their own completely mundane, rather boring, sort of whatever micro experiences of life. But as you start to listen to the whole thing, you realize that what emerges out of them is a kind of subconscious of anxiety around climate, or at least coming to terms and awareness around climate. Now, the piece, which was originally conceived as a 1-hour piece, and we reconfigured in Venice to be a durational performance of 8 hours a day on a loop. So it's an endless opera. You walk in at whatever point, you stay for as many loops as you want, which is probably why it sort of broke the heart of so many people, because it can really kind of, it holds you for long enough that you can maybe get to the point where you have almost had enough. It's also got 2 twin singers who are identical and who sing together about a 3D printer that is reproducing the world anew, and one of the 2 twins supposedly has been printed by this 3D printer that was left on by the mother, and they kind of embody this utopia of completely dystopian techno-utopia of being able to reproduce food and plants and so on. Anyway, so what emerges, it's a piece that isn't really about climate change or the catastrophe. Certainly doesn't feel like it when you're there. It's a piece that certainly doesn't talk to you about it. It's a piece that holds you for just long enough for you to have for you to tune in to the thing inside you that you know is happening, because it usually just appears in moments of intensity, actually. Some moments that have something to do with the sublime, but in the opposite direction, the sublime of horror, right? And those moments of intensity kind of catch you, and then you move on with your life. And I want to pause here and say that is the experience of a very specific part of the world, because under the unequally distributed effects of climate change are also unequally produced, and those two things are not the same peoples. So actually, if you are living in a place that is at the forefront of climate change, you don't just get it through moments of horrible sublime, you literally get it in the shape of your own survival. And I think it's very important to make that distinction whenever we're talking about this. But it was a piece that was presented in the context of the Venice Biennale, and so for the most part, its audience was the horrible sublime audience, all of us here. And so what it did, perhaps it wasn't so healing, Roya. I have a fear that piece is not necessarily a good healing example, but it did create the conditions of attunement, I think. And in that sense, it fits with your question. I wanted to just briefly mention something, one last thing, which is when the word healing, when I was holding the word healing in my mind, turning it around and trying to figure it out, attunement was one of the things that came out, but actually repair or reparation to a certain extent actually also came to mind. And I don't, Sun and Sea doesn't hold all of those things within, so it's not a good occasion to talk about it right in this second, but we were thinking with Sun and Sea and the existence of the work in Venice, not only about presenting a work, but actually about kind of really thinking about the conditions of the ground, the physical ground that we stood on. So it was held inside military zone, which from a symbolic standpoint, that space had never been open to the public before. And I do want to say that from a symbolic standpoint, we did a very micro military invasion of a military zone in bikinis, which is just so cool. We also worked with the inmates of the local male prison to print and screen print the catalog. That was the vinyl. We also worked with the city of Venice to turn the sand that we had procured for the stage into a series of children's playgrounds. So we tried to have these kind of healing, but in a kind of maybe expanded, maybe sort of urban sense, relationships with the city, so that it's not just a piece of performance. But
I mean,
sorry for going on so long.
One thing maybe to say for me personally, it was like you can relate to the people on this beach.
Totally.
So basically, you see yourself in a mirror, and then you have to think about what Margarete Mitscherlich wrote after the Second World War about the Banalität des Bösen, the banality of the bad, you know, of the evil. In the sense that basically you see how all these people like us that are just doing what they are used to do, just having their little, you know, wellness or well-being moment, they are basically part of a giant machinery that is destroying the habitat of so many, right? So that's this kind of effect that makes, and then the libretto is like, you have to read it while you are listening to it. We're not used in opera to read any more libretto because we are used to understand it now. You know, I cannot understand it. So, but when you really read it, then this was eye-opening and delivering so many contrasts also to the look and feel. That yeah.
I always say that it has the kind of emotional. When you're really there, it has inbuilt within the piece. There's the emotional pathos of like a piece of ham falls on the floor. You know, it's like nothing happens. You're talking about sandwiches, blah blah blah. But someone actually wrote a very good review of the piece and said, you realize that this is how the world ends, not with a bang, but with a slow kind of...
This is exactly where we are.
With tears.
That's more optimistic, almost. Yeah, I love that you also describe this kind of juxtaposition between this military location and everyone there and their swimming costumes. And I think that this idea of architecture and healing and what is actually the relationship between the two. Claudia, I know that, of course, you are the curator of Spheric in Tulum, Mexico. And is your mic working?
Yeah, it's working. Okay. They put it on the moment you start to speak, so it feels like it's not working.
You can start screaming again.
Like all our last talk, it was always like, is the microphone? Oh yeah, it worked.
So the space that you're running in Tulum is, of course, it's a kind of creative sphere, and it combines residencies with exhibitions and workshops, and it really is all about a new way of experiencing art. How do you think that, especially in this beautiful, you know, unusual architecture of this space, how does architecture and design actually create public and private spaces for healing?
So I think much like Lucia, who went back to the original meaning of the word healing and kind of looked for the iteration of the term that most resonated with her project, I'm a big friend of words, and a story has it that the world was created through the word as well. So I think at the beginning of this project, we went back and we started questioning words. And one of the words we questioned, and you'll immediately understand what the connection is with the question you asked, was the word museum. Where does the word museum come from? And it is actually a term that denotes a space which was a temple dedicated to the muses. So it was not a very defined physical space. It was not a space that was meant to house objects. It was a space that was meant for people to go and connect with their own creative impulse. And I think, are we able to show some of the, it's already there, okay. So while I'm speaking, you'll see a few images of different shows, and I'll say a few words on certain works that you can see on the screen here. So I think what is very important to keep in mind is that the space that emerged out of the jungle, as Nikolai earlier said so rightly, is a space for people to reconnect with the source. And I find that if we address art as a healing power, it is mostly because it makes us reconnect inside, on the inside, with the fact that we're all part of one large fabric of connectivity, and that we all are endowed with a special gift to create and contribute something. And I think that, you know, Roth's architecture, which is the capsule in which the artistic projects evolve, shows the reverence to nature, to the planet where, you know, that we inhabit and from which everything starts, and shows that rather than trying to compete with nature or dominate nature or separate ourselves from nature, the key is to be found in a harmonious, not even coexistence, but because coexistence still supposes a certain sort of separation, but just the recognition, the acknowledgement that we are one and we are part of it, which is why you see trees growing in the space, which is why there's a lot of movement in the space, which is why an exhibition there is not just an exhibition, which again would be something that supposes an object-subject separation, but it is a completely immersive experience where the artists, when they come, work together with the local craftsmen. For instance, Cecilia Bengalia, you see a picture of her in one of the dance performances. I cannot see the screen, sadly, but yes, actually here you see Cecilia on the left, and on the right you see children that go to, you know, afternoon school in a local charity project. And so Cecilia, when she came, she gave dance workshops to the children. The children were able to produce their own costumes. So it was really a completely immersive experience that activated the creative power and gift of everyone there. And you see the sculptures that are in the space. They were made in collaboration with the local craftsmen. And you know, they also become part of the building. So the building is no longer a limiting shell, but it's also a living organism that changes with each iteration, with each time we, you know, invested with a new project.
Yeah, and I think it's so interesting, as we touched on that earlier, right? So the space is still closed, and kind of going through everything we've just been through, what is the dynamic now between a physical museum or a digital museum, and how those boundaries are really kind of being closed. So Ria, this is a really nice segue into kind of the physical museum into kind of the digital world. And I know that you use social media really as a tool to also express yourself and to share your art. And I mean, social media, we know there's more than 4 billion people using social media around the world. You're 3 times more likely to have symptoms of depression if you do use it. It gives me a lot of anxiety, but somehow you're actually using it as a way to create an intimate space to share your thoughts and your experiences and also your art. How are you using that to your advantage? Is it therapeutic for you?
I personally don't. I think initially when I was first starting out a few years ago and first starting to get traction, it's difficult to distinguish whether something is therapeutic or if the serotonin rush that you're getting from validation is misperceived as therapeutic.
Bit of both.
Yeah. One is very fleeting and transient, and the other one is more sustainable. But as a disabled, mentally ill woman, social media has given me my livelihood. So when I think of social media, a person like me, you know, who is an immigrant to the United States, lived in a very poverty-stricken area in Brooklyn, no college-educated parents. I always felt there were very few prospects for me. So even though I cradled a very strong curiosity for art from a young age, exploring that curiosity was never something that was encouraged from my socioeconomic racial background. For example, I have friends who, you know, when they were 5 or 6 and they were doing little doodles, their parents were like, wow, my kid's really good at drawing. I should send them to like art school. So I never got a chance to sort of hone these skills that I had. And I never had a very, what you would say, a conventional trajectory in my career. And I think, yeah, just suddenly getting featured on an article for Vogue opened the floodways, and then all of a sudden, overnight, I had a lot of attention, which was also initially very nerve-wracking, because I think once you become vulnerable online, people really just thrust all of their traumas onto you because you openly talk about it. So it comes from a good place where they know that you'll understand, and they want to vent, and they want to say, hey, I really connect to what you've been saying about, you know, whether it's sexual violence or personality disordered dissociation or whatever it is that people, because of capitalistic rituals, aren't really tuned into. Yeah, I get like overwhelmed with the number of, because I can't realistically respond to everyone. You know, if I'm getting emails on a daily basis from people about the history of their life and their traumas and sexual violence that they experienced from an ex-boyfriend. I mean, these are such intimate details of their life that if I even tried to respond to every single one of them, I would have compassion fatigue, and I also wouldn't give them the response that they deserve. So it can be overwhelming in that sense. I'm not sure if it's therapeutic for me anymore, but I'm happy to know that my work is therapeutic for others, and I'm happy to provide that.
Yeah, and I think that givingness of creating something where you give access to people, feel the confidence to perhaps speak about things that they didn't have the confidence to speak about before, and allowing a safe space in order to do that. I think that's clearly what you're giving, and that's why more so than the Vogue article, the work that you do is powerful. And in terms of also giving voice to minorities, Lilith, I know that you co-founded, is it Yeah World? Is that how you say it? Yeah World, which aims to create access to healing through creative expression for and with Black and Indigenous people, people of color, queer, trans, non-binary, and two-spirit beings. And there's this great motto on the site, which I love: let's create, let's commune, let's co-liberate, which I think was so powerful. So how did that actually come about? What are those healing processes and that you're partaking in?
Thank you. We started YA 5 years ago. I run this organization mostly based out of Brooklyn, Lenape-Hoking, with my collaborator and co-director, Rad Pereira. We are artists, we're theater makers, and part of what we've been working towards is how do we actually bring art in relationship to actual material human need? And how do we not just talk about these ideas of healing, but actually do something? So I started this with my collaborator Rad, who is an Afro-Indigenous Brazilian immigrant. We have a whole community of artists that we collaborate with. So I guess, how do we do it? Is that part of your question? Is that your question? How do we do it? I mean, it's really about not coming in and assuming, especially for me as a white artist with privilege, like that I know what someone else needs or what a community needs, and that I go in and kind of give that or be some kind of savior or some kind of repeating the violent patterns of colonization that the art world often kind of does, and instead work with people and understand what are you looking for, what are your needs, what are your desire, and how might we create an environment where you can express yourself and create an environment where you can let go of something or heal something with a community of people around you that you actually want to do that with. So that's kind of how we started. And the other thing we've been working on is, we didn't make a kind of 5-year plan. We knew that this healing work is also inside us, and so we move quite slowly. We really understand that everything we do is also going to be impacted by our lens, right? So until I am unraveling my own embodied trauma, my own, and working towards my own healing, I can't really actually create an environment for someone else to heal. I can, and we did. We kind of started before we knew what it was, but by going quite slowly and listening to our collaborators, I think we've been able to build this community of people because it's not about us. It's not about us kind of imposing this idea onto someone else. It's much more organic and slow, and more recently we're really trying to work with community organizers, because I think so often artists and organizers desperately need each other to make something happen, but we're siloed, and so we've been really trying to do a lot of popular education and create environments where communities can say, okay, we are making these meal kits for COVID. We're giving out hundreds and hundreds of meal kits a week. And in each meal kit, we could easily put a flyer or a coloring book or something that brings the community, that goes to these households, offers something for the youth in that household, and also gives information, right? Like, know your rights. Know that if an ICE agent comes and knocks on your door, you do not have to open the door. But you need an artist to make that flyer. You need an artist to come in and create the coloring book. So connecting those people has been great. I don't know if I'm answering your question.
Yeah, totally. That's so interesting, and there are so many layers to that. It's so interesting to see the different dynamics of how you can do that, as a community, but then also the question of as an individual and how we're kind of connecting with ourselves. And on that, this is really, Cecil, read, and I'm so fascinated now by this whole concept of smell. I wasn't as familiar, but now after really being so fascinated by what you do, I have to just state a few facts that I read about smell, and then have you really lead the way on that and connecting how important our senses are to healing. 93% of communication is non-verbal, leaking out in ways that expose our underlying thoughts and feelings. The nose is the oldest and most advanced human interface. We breathe up to 24,000 times a day. Described as the most direct pathway to the brain, olfaction is subconscious, precognitive, and emotional. It offers a powerful window into our brains, behaviors, emotions, and our communication. Cecil, what can smell teach us?
It's all about life. That's this work. Yeah, so what I do is literally try to understand what life is. The essence of life, the air that you breathe, you are what you breathe, so to say, the invisible surrounding that surround you full time, all the time, provide information you don't see, but it determines who you are, where you are, how you feel, what is going on, and how to navigate with what you have understood subconsciously. The smell have the capacity to trigger emotion and memory in the quickest processing in the brain. Everything goes through the rendering part of the brain, except for smell. What makes us humans is that we have emotions. Smell, trigger, emotion in two synapses. 1, 2. You are digging deep and you activate your reaction to the situation you are in at that very moment. Nothing else do that. So passion for life is what drives what I do. And tolerance starts with the sense of smell. So the first I tried to do in my life was to be tolerant. And I accomplished that by putting my nose into the world out there, all over, all nano level of it for 7 years, and I came out as a transformed human being. Suddenly I understood that we are equipped with amazing interfaces, and those interfaces are called the senses. It's not only 5, it's 12. And we don't use them properly. So of course we are unhappy, you know? We are not at all in contact with ourselves, most of all. So how can we bring back confidence and passion to life? We have to start with what we have for free, which is the body and the senses. So how do we do that? We have to show the world only through a couple of the senses. You know, we are completely detoxinated with visual and other, stimuli that not even make sense in the way the body understands the world. So my passion for life is what drives me. Every breath I do, I try to understand. And I love it. And I must say, having understood that tolerance starts with the smell, enable me to overcome my own trauma. And born in Scandinavia, as the oldest of 6 women, with a mother that's 20 years older than me, and my youngest sister 20 years younger. So it's like 7 women, and an island is already a very difficult beginning. But understanding that life is not only about people, life is about other animals and other species around. I very early started to explore nature and got a lot of satisfaction by understanding that communication go beyond semiotics. So chemistry was a passion at the early stage. So chemical communication is the first way any species on planet Earth communicated. Bacteria to bacteria, bacteria to insect, insects to animals, and there's no animal, of course, and humans. Between all species and creatures on this planet, chemistry is happening full time, all the time, even when we sleep. So trying to understand this is what I try to do in my work. Yeah, chemistry is what I do.
Yeah, you've collected 7,000 smells.
Much more.
Much more, okay.
I saw now this.
I don't have a website, so it's hard to kind of update those numbers.
I saw now on Instagram this little video popped up with a cat and a mouse that were smelling each other. And the cat wouldn't eat the mouse, but it was just really smelling, so I couldn't believe that this is really happening. But actually, it's like one of these cute videos that actually my kids are sending around. But this was really happening. And if you look at this mouse and the cat smelling, like all the time, like coming closer and then going far away, you really can see how they are connecting through the molecules that they are exchanging with each other. And this is something that I found super fascinating when Ria, when you were talking about, you were answering the question how social media, because social media is also about interacting with other living beings. Yeah, we are only interacting through bits, but we are not interacting with chemistry. Although on the nuclear level, it's almost the same, and it's connecting us through our brain, through the visual impulse most of the time with the world. And you answered the question regarding therapeutics that it's probably more therapeutic for the others that can see you. And I found this extremely interesting that you make this point and that you receive all this input because of the public persona that we are presenting. And if you would have to summarize what all these people have in common when they are contacting you, what is their when you would have to summarize, what is their biggest desire? What is something that unites them in their desire to contact you?
I think every single person in this room has some sort of unresolved trauma or repressed trauma. And trauma is different things for different people. Some people can be traumatized by their parents' divorce, and other people aren't affected by it at all, and it's we're not doing a game of oppression Olympics to see whose trauma is more significant than others. So I think what really connects us is we live in this hyper capitalist, productivity driven world that forces us to not be in tune with our internal self, with the part of us that acknowledges these traumas and then therefore begins the very arduous process of healing. And I think when you see someone who's very vocal and very radically transparent online about these things, it's initially jarring and it can make a lot of people uncomfortable, but then it inevitably forces them to think and look at their relationships that they've had, what may or may not have been toxic, when they have been toxic. It just all surfaces somehow, and then people feel more comfortable sort of initiating these discussions. Was that the answer to your question?
So I'm fascinated by the fact that when the people are writing to you, it definitely uncovers that they don't have anybody else probably that they can contact so openly, or they don't have another, possibility to express it and to find themselves mirrored in a way that they can trust, because I think it's a question of trust. The smell is also a question of trust. So when I smell somebody else and exchange information, it's something that happens only when I have this minimum of trust necessary to build up more of trust. And I found it extremely interesting that basically the social media seems to recreate this kind of space through a digital tool, and that you created it. But with this comes a lot of responsibility, obviously, also. Because basically now you are like a priest in former time, a shaman, or somebody that is, that is opening up for
Messiah,
this.
Ria.
Please don't.
No. I mean it like a therapist, right? That people are trusting you because you.
Well, I'm probably a very horrible therapist because I don't respond to most. I mean, it's impossible. Like I said, you want if someone is taking time out of their day to give me a 2-3 page email about an abusive relationship that they've experienced, or childhood trauma that they only recently began to grapple with, I'm also in the process of healing, and I don't have the answers, and I'm also still quite young. So I'm not some guru that I can offer you an insight into my world and hope that you can glean something from that, but I don't think I have the authority or the credentials to really tell anyone anything besides you just have to keep going.
But what I find interesting is that alone through triggering it, and when somebody is writing like 2 pages, this is already a creative process actually, that is absolutely therapeutic. I don't know, Lilith, how you see this point, but basically this is like a social sculpture that is triggering people to reveal their own secrets. But this process of revelation is a very artistic process actually, because to sit down and to write a letter, that's already probably more therapeutic than probably doesn't need really the response. That would be my my take on that.
It's more about just the catharsis of unloading. And I read every single one of them. So
you read
every single one of them.
Wow.
I just don't have the capacity to respond, and it's important to respect your own capacity.
It's amazing because it's interesting because in nature we have these processes in a natural way already organized, right? We just disconnected from these processes that keep us safe and that keep us in a certain network. And now we are recreating them, and this is probably one of these examples that I find extremely fascinating, and I had no idea before this talk that you have created something like this. And this would be maybe, Roya, also a question to the panelists. How can we create this kind of spaces, digital or real, where people can be themselves and can open up and can, you know, talk to themselves maybe in the first place?
Yeah, I think that in the end, I mean, it's a very large example, but Marina Abramovich's practice is all about communicating and therapy through connecting with strangers, and she always says, what does she say? When you can have a non-verbal conversation with a stranger, then he can't cover himself up with words. He can't create a wall. So it's interesting because you're saying people are contacting you directly, so I think there are 2 dimensions to that. There's one way where communication and speaking to a stranger suddenly allows you to feel things and come out with your inner truths. And then there's also this idea of sitting directly opposite a stranger or moving or dancing, which actually ends up being more therapeutic because it's not about words, it's about physically feeling your inner self and how are you kind of translating that. Maybe, Claudia, this is something that you can speak about with your collaboration with Cecilia Bengalia and also Cecil. It was all about the rituals of moving. So I think maybe that's a really interesting topic to segue into is what are those rituals of movement that aren't verbal and how are those perhaps more useful?
Yes, absolutely. And maybe I'll answer in 2 steps because one word that kept, coming to my mind while I was listening to your very valuable contributions was that we so oftentimes get caught up in representation. In representation, first, how we should look at things, how we should experience things. I mean, and museums are not at all shy trying to tell us, patronizing us into you have to, stand 2 meters away. You cannot talk. You cannot be this. You cannot be that. It's only at this time of the day, etc. So I think if we manage to break that framework and understand that human experience necessarily always involves, first of all, vulnerability, and that codes are insufficient to reflect or coordinate human experience, and that the true experience is so much richer than any of those prescriptive elements. I think this will already be a step ahead, and this is why your work is so important because you share vulnerability, and that's how people can find this space for themselves, because all of a sudden it becomes okay to be vulnerable. And since I have the immense pleasure of being united in this panel with Cecil, also this experience of going beyond the first appearance of things. So as many of you probably know, last year, all of the Caribbean was invaded by something called sargasso, which is a brown algae that killed a lot of the life that lives close to the shores and caused a lot of issues and also revealed certain pre-existing issues. Sounds familiar to what we're going through right now as well. And I organized an exhibition called Aliga, because I understood that the etymology of algae came from aligare Latin, which means to connect, surprise, almost an invitation, or a comment on the fact that we're not connected and an invitation to connect. And Cecil had this amazing approach of challenging us to go beyond the first appearance, beyond the first disgust, towards the appearance of this brown, undefinable mess of plants that seem to interfere with our lives. So what did Cecil do? We sent packages of the sargasso to her studio in Berlin, and she decomposed it into 22 different smell molecules. And each of those smell molecules gave us information about where this seaweed had traveled from, what kind of pollution it picked up on the way, what factors might have caused it. And some of the smells, as shocking as it may seem, and I don't know if we can have maybe the image, there's an installation shot of Cecil's beautiful installation, because she 3D printed the shape of the molecules of each of the smell components of the sargasso, so that people could take them, get in touch with something that we wouldn't get in touch with, and truly get in touch with it, for that matter, and examine it and experience it, and maybe receive an information about it that through other rational routes was not accessible to us. In terms of the movement itself, so, being a bit more directly connected to your question as well, we had, of course, the performance in which we involved people from the local community. So they started to move in ways which were very free. It was very interesting to see when Cecilia worked with the children who, partly are of Mayan origin, how she was able to prompt them to enact certain movements and to actually find their own movements, for that matter, and understand that it is an art to know how to move in the space. Also, we hosted an artist duo from Los Angeles called Data Garden. What they do is fascinating, because they connect electric sensors to plants, and these sensors translate the flux of energy in the plant into music. And so this music then, Cecilia was doing an alchemical dance performance, and the source of all.
That's so cool, and we all need to hear that plant-based track. That's amazing. And I think that's so interesting, right? The way in which technology and then, the physical experience of movement or sound can then all come together. And Lucia, of course, you have been really a part of this Back to Earth, project at Serpentine, which is really an artist-led campaign and protocols initiative responding to the environmental crisis. And there was one of the commissions that I read about was Tan Jones, who is practicing singing with nature, and what that experience is in the wilderness. So singing in Glastonbury versus singing at a tube stop, and how those two are actually interlinked to restore the peace of the land. How can art kind of use to heal our planet, I guess?
Lost my mind. For those of you who weren't here yesterday, I think I should probably preempt this whole thing by saying that I work at the intersection of art, environmental ecology, and, let's say, organizational ecology, so systems. So, how can we work both on the subjects of environmental balance, environmental and climate justice, and the infrastructures and methodologies and methods through which we do that work? And that which I called General Ecology after a book actually called General Ecology, was a project that I wrote for the Serpentine Galleries, where I was at the time curator of live and public programs, so performance, basically film and music. more as a kind of events, yes, public facing, yes, but also research project, also kind of internal, very bureaucratical, very infrastructure kind of structural transformation project as well. And we're trying to do those things at the same time, by sort of always mirroring the things that we're doing things for or like about with the ways that we're doing them. And so the General Ecology project, in a sense, had as its aim, in 2018, I also somehow miraculously managed to convince the Serpentine to turn that into a department, because I felt that if there was a structural transformation to the actual jobs of, you know, the job descriptions de facto, then it would hopefully then survive after I go, or, you know, and hopefully just be taken on as a kind of actual structural transformation. So there's now a General Ecology department, which isn't kind of nuts, but it's there, and hopefully, and I'm kind of actually now working on the ways for it to remain there, past me. And of course, one of the ways in which we're doing that is something that is, again, molded on the network-like relationships that exist between beings and species and forms of life on the planet, and had to do a lot with the fact that the General Ecology Project works always in collaboration with other organizations, be they art institutions, but also very often scientific or environmental activist, or you know, even sometimes governmental or educational kind of organizations. And so that network, which we're now working to sort of formalize a little bit more, so it really has a kind of a resilience to a certain extent, is composed of, it also, I should say, has an enormous number of artists as well. So there's really kind of a teeming, self-sustaining, I think, life to the whole thing, I hope. And Back to Earth was one of the sprouts from General Ecology. So I used to say that General Ecology was a project to infect an art organization with the ecological. But infecting anything with anything is just not really the vibe anymore. So inspire, I guess. But if that was one of the intentions, then one of its successes was that at the time that there needed to be a kind of decision about what the 50th anniversary of the Serpentine's activities would be, that it would be dedicated to the environment. And so we came up with something, we worked on it quite a lot, and we came up with something called Back to Earth, which is really an initiative that itself invites more than 65 artists to propose an artwork that is also in some way an environmental initiative, prototype, or campaign. And that we're working really across the whole map between very visible, very sort of public awareness focused, very performative or very aesthetically based work, and like infrastructural, very slow, very kind of, you know, policy based and something like that work. That we're really trying to make sure that you don't necessarily see all of it, because the things that need to not be seen aren't seen, whilst other things do the shiny thing that you need them to do for a project to actually find success and kind of really get ahead. And so you've mentioned Aisha Tyne-Jones. I would do a disservice to everyone if I tried, but some things are going to manifest in the shape of a film, for example. So, no, it's too long. That's the principle of Back to Earth. And yes, so there's, in that show, as a result of its really multi-headedness, there is both, and Cecil, you're in it, there is both the notion of attunement and healing around the question of checking in with inside the self, attuning with a kind of vast and kind of ultimately lively planet. And also the question of repairing and reparations, actually very crucially, because whilst it's not whilst it's a project that emerged out of the environmental, it does try to be sort of accurate and true to the ways in which things are constructed and organized and how they work. And it is a fact that global emissions, colonialism, industrialization, and the sort of rise of popularity of Darwinian evolution theory, the rise of popularity of the idea of free market capitalism, and all of those things are together. And so without addressing, without really kind of looking in the face of how those things are all part of the same incredibly complex system, I think we wouldn't be, to a certain extent, accurate or truthful to the intention, which is to try lots of different things with the understanding that there isn't a solution, that there isn't a kind of resolve. We won't get to a machine that will do the thing that we need it to do, but that we just come together and find these moments of strategic togetherness, and together we come up with something that might work up to a certain point, and then it won't, and then we'll just kind of go this way, and then we'll just be the kind of teeming, swarming, lively, profoundly lively mess that we have always been.
So this is very interesting because it opens up the question if you can be healthy when your environment is not healthy. Yeah, because yesterday we had this talk about Gaia, and Lynn Margulis, and Salome Rode quoted her saying that when we were talking about this tree, that probably Lynn Margulis would have said that this tree is a community. Like we are also, our organism is also a community, and when we see ourselves as communities, then basically it doesn't matter if I'm, you know, rich and healthy while my neighborhood family in another district of the city is poor and infected by corona, because then my body is basically also infected, and empathy becomes something very practical, becomes something that is actually foundation of life. And this is, Cecil, what basically your work taught me, that this invisible connections that are on a molecular level are basically extensions of our own body into the body, or into whatever we perceive as the body of the other, but it's not the other, it's ourselves. And your artistic practice actually is leading exactly into this direction that shows us that that the competition that we see between the bodies, or between the, you know, manifestations of individuals, you know, is in fact just a misunderstood need of cooperation. And if you could highlight this on your work, that would be fantastic, because it's really something that is extremely powerful when you do it with the smells and also the connectivity between the smell and the mental health, because the mental health is also not possible without the physicality of our mentality. That is actually every thought is a physical actually manifestation.
Also, in my work in general, I have various devices that enable me to literally collect invisible, volatile molecules emitting from various smell sources that can be, you know, nano level, it can be very concrete. I might be sitting here recording her, you know, anxiety at this very moment, and tomorrow I will have it on my computer, and then I will replicate it, and then bring it to the Down to Earth exhibition, maybe. So what I do is literally looking into these spaces in between people and in between various things and plants and animals of various kinds, and trying to understand how do they get the message across, how do they send signals, how do they code what they want to say or what kind of reaction they want to have. A rose doesn't smell because you like to smell a rose. The rose give off the smell molecules to attract insects so that they can do pollination. So we all know this. So the same happened with humans. And what I do is literally decontextualize a smell, take it out of its comfort zone, let's put it like that, and put it in a very comfortable zone so that you or whoever, as a observer, focus the information in that very setting only is provided to the air that you breathe. So every breath you do, you inhale some particle of what I'm trying to say. And this can trigger multiple layers of your consciousness. And it's very important to take that moment, to take that time to contemplate about something. We live in a world that's all about surface and headlines. What smell does is really, it goes so deep that you engage with it and your emotions go crazy. And that's not also, you know, I've been doing a lot of work also with post-traumatic stress disorder, like tracking a smell, you know, of the moment where things start to get wrong. Decontextualize the smell, take it out of that traumatic context, put it into a context that is pleasant, and you train your awareness towards the same smell, and you'll be shocked what the outcome is. This is without any kind of medication. You are literally solving a lot of problems just by being human beings, using these amazing interfaces we are born with that are there for the purpose to be happy species. And we forgot all about this. We need to bring it back. And I think what COVID has learned us is to travel inwards and really understand the capacity of what we have inside, including all the senses. And what we are missing most is touch, smell, taste. That's what makes us humans. We are humans because we have emotions, and the senses is contributing to that. And what the machine cannot and will probably never do is having emotions. So if we don't take care of this now, it might be too late.
Perfect. This is
So empathy can be accomplished with VR, but if you don't understand it with your physical body and mind, forget it. It's not going to work. So what I do also in Azulik was making emotional artifacts. Engage with the issues in the world, bring back the emotions. And it's not without reason that as human beings, from zero to puberty is when we are learning. We're learning in the context of using our senses and emotion. And play and joy is essential to learning. We need to change the rhetoric. We need to change the way we are talking about these issues. I'm so sick of fear and scare and paranoia. And this is in the discourse of racism. This is in the discourse of climate change. We need to change the language. We need to heal, you know, by understanding what it means to be human being first, and then we can solve the problems out there afterwards. And I think that the art play a huge role here, and we need to really start to think in, you know, collective intelligence sometimes is more productive than just sitting around competing. Collaboration is the new competition, I think, you know, and I think it goes beyond me. It goes with me and this tree that tried to kind of make me crazy here. I'm going to grab it and put it in my bag and send back some molecules to you. But anyway, it's you know, it's like, yeah, come on, wake up, for God's sake, you know. I'm sick of it all, you know. And I think it's very important, and I also hear Julieta say that in the previous panel, take the time to understand what you have been going through in this 4 months, 3 months, 1 week, or whatever. This internal travel has been so important. The reality before was a dream. What we are living now is the reality. Really, it is very important to bring back joy and playfulness to what it means to be alive. And the only way we can accomplish that is to use the senses to understand the serious issues out there. And if we understand and use our senses, including the sense of smell and touch and taste and balance and you name it, say it, suddenly it's fun to understand the issues of concern. Joy and playfulness is essential to memory. After puberty, everything is repetition, pragmatic and competitive. It's no fun anymore. And I think joy is so important. Let's have fun.
Thank you.
I sound like a missionary here.
Bravo, bravo, bravo.
No, but what is well-being? You know, what is healing? Even those words make me crazy. It's like pragmatic. It's just so, you know, hello. Just be a human being. Be honest. Be...
Lilith.
Yeah.
Cecil is talking about that the world that we have created, that is a senseless world in a sense, you know? It's a senseless world, and we have to bring back sense. And this is something, sense that you can smell, but sounds in this reason
But
in a
even
way.
the rhetoric of the marketing
Even
took over, but science left. You know,
Yes.
so the whole rhetoric around smell is around beauty, seduction. You know, you name it, they say.
Yeah.
You know, and scent and olfaction is
Yeah.
all positive connotated.
Yeah.
So only way I speak what I do is I use smell, hardcore. It is it, yeah.
Hardcore smell.
It smells, yeah. I work with smell. I never done the scent. I never done the perfume. I make smells.
Yeah.
I make real stuff, you know,
Yeah.
and it's not pretending.
For
It's
real
not-
emotions and not pretended
Yeah,
emotions.
it's a real
that's
body smell.
yeah.
It's not just a scent
Yeah.
of a body smell.
You need to
yeah?
lock down the smell of COVID so then we all know what it smells like. And
I'm
we can
working
avoid
on it.
Oh yeah, perfect.
Send it to us first.
Yeah.
I just wanted to show this slide. I just installed it in Frankfurt yesterday. So these are molecules in the earth that make the earth smell. So when you smell, and everybody's like back to nature, out in nature, knowing that nature is healing. Nature is healing because of this molecule. It produces serotonin, it makes you less depressive, etc. A lot of scientific paper on exactly that molecule these days. So this molecule is coming out of the earth because a bacteria produced the molecule to attract an insect. So here we are under the surface, chemical communication going on, making us happy, smelling the earth. And the purpose of the smell is literally to tell somebody, look, or come to me, I'm seductive, I want to reproduce. And that's amazing. So the work here, you scale down, the small computers pump out the molecule as quick as the bacteria would have pumped it out. So you walk around and you communicate with the earth. It just opened yesterday, so it's possible to scale down, to kneel down, find out what is going on beyond the gallery space, beyond, between each other, among each other, in a different way than just looking at your new shoes or your new lipstick or whatever. It's incredible. And what it does, you gain information you never ever thought you would ever get. So.
Some lipstick is still okay.
Huh?
Some lipstick is still okay.
But behind the mask doesn't make sense anymore.
No, but bringing back sense to life, I think that's a very big topic for art. And maybe for, if you could elaborate a little bit on that artistic practice and how the artists that you are working with are able to do this, because we lost a lot of sense. We are all basically, doesn't matter where we come, our grandparents all had religion. Most of them, you know, most of them had religion that really provided a lot of meaning, a lot of sense, a lot of structure, a lot of empathy also, because every religion is built actually on empathy. We have lost this, obviously, as we know, in a postmodern world for good reasons, partly. But now art maybe is the way to recreate it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think, like you said, ancient knowledges, right, are much more connected to the body and to the body that is this earth. I think I was reading about Gaia and all the work you're doing, and I think, you know, if we actually, you're asking about artists and how we do that. If we look to, you know, the different epistemologies than like Eurocentric white, you know, artists, and we actually who are, you know, we're all brainwashed by these like dissociated capitalist tendencies that we've been socialized into. And if we actually look to indigenous knowledges that center the earth and center the body, it was always there. It was always there. This whole idea of this separation, this dissociation with the earth and with the senses, with each other. I mean, that is a product of our current world. And I think by listening to people who have maintained, despite all the violence and colonization and erasure, have survived and maintained these ancient knowledges that always come back to the earth and care for nature and the body. Those are the artists who, you know, have so much information that we can learn from. So I think that's one way. I also think, you know, art right now, and you'll hear more about this in the next lecture from some people I know very well, but, you know, immersive experiential art that is less about this object over there and more about something happening all around us, something embodied, something participatory and experiential. I mean, that is also, and I'm also make performance, so of course I'm going to be preaching this too, but being in alive and being together and actually sharing space is, I think that's how we also do it. We have to be together, and I think that's why COVID is so confusing, because it's like all these steps backwards, like and steps forwards. But I think if we can find ways to be together, and be inside the work, and work that centers our, brings us back into the body, which brings us back to catharsis, right? The very thing we started with. It's like, instead of living in our mind, actually returning to our bodies, I think that is how we can move forward and actually heal all the broken things inside that.
Lilith, what better way to end than at the beginning with catharsis?
And serotonin.
And serotonin, yeah.
The new rituals of serotonin.
Exactly,
This is what we
which
need.
we can all, and everyone can go scream at home. But on that, the one quote that I think speaks so well to that is, especially with what we've been going through, is art teaches us to suffer more successfully. And perhaps that is what we can provocatively take home today. But we are unfortunately out of time, but I just wanted to say thank you so much to the most fascinating and beautiful, delightful group of amazing panelists. Thank you so much for being with us, and Mikolai for having me.
Thank you so much, Ria, for preparing
And thank you all for coming out, and have a great day.
Big applause.